Saturday, October 4th, and you know what that means. It is time for the High Risk Wrestling Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Pierce, getting ready for the showdown. You know you can check out the socials, Charismatic Creations on Facebook and YouTube, Charismatic_Creations52 on Instagram, and of course the 215 on Twitter. And today's show, we're going to take a look back at the old InVasion storyline, WWE, or WWF at the time, versus ECWCW, and just how things played out, going all the way up until, let's say, the InVasion pay-per-view, because things happened after the InVasion pay-per-view. But for now, you know what's next, so just go on and hit my music. This list is very simple. These are the stars, the major stars that were missing during the InVasion. And we start with number 5, Goldberg. Now, what you're going to find out about a lot of the stars during this time that were part of WCW were signed not to WCW, but to AOL Time Warner. And Goldberg was definitely one of those stars, the man with the undefeated streak and carrying the torch of WCW just wasn't there, and that is ultimately what hurt this alliance. We're going to dive into it a little bit more. Number 4, the NWO. Now, I am cheating here by putting the NWO as a group, but it's the easiest way to not expand the list, because yes, during the alliance, Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall were sorely missed. Like Goldberg, they would go on to later sign with the WWF after the InVasion. But could you imagine if the WCW and ECW squad had just any of these three members? Number 3, the Sandman. Now you're like, why would you put a guy like the Sandman above Goldberg and the WO? Well, the Sandman, along with Tommy Dreamer, along with RVD, they were kind of the heartbeat of ECW, the breath, the life, and he just had a great connection with the fans, and it would have been awesome to see the Sandman during that period. Number 2, Sabu. This one might be the biggest hurt piece to ECW, not having the homicidal, suicidal, genocidal, death-defying Sabu. He would have definitely turned the tides, possibly into the favor of the alliance. And of course, number 1, Sting, the heart, the soul, the lifeblood, the everything of WCW. Like Goldberg, like the NWO, he would later go on to sign with WWE, but his was many years later. It just did not fit having Sting at one point considered to be his prime in this storyline, because Lord knows we would have finally gotten Sting versus The Undertaker. We'll be right back. The spotlight is back on, and it's shining on none other than TNA Wrestling. Long gone are the days of, well, maybe being the doormat of professional wrestling. At one point, they were looked as to be the next up-and-comer, to be the second in command of the professional wrestling world. But after many years of LOL TNA, they took a downturn. But now with Anthem, being in charge, there's been a rebirth of TNA. They've gotten their feet sturdy. Now they have this showdown against NXT. Originally, when we called the InVasion, playing back to what this show is about. But the showdown, go check out Let's Talk About It, because, well, can TNA win this showdown? We have a couple of matches lined up, and it's time for them to stop being the little brother to NXT. They were here long before NXT, and it's time for them to show up and show out with Bound for Glory on the horizon. TNA has to really look good here. We'll be right back. right, here we are coming up this week, the NXTNA Showdown. And when this show first was announced, we got the name The InVasion. It was a play off the InVasion storyline. And it was great. I'm like, okay, this is cool. And now it's called Showdown for some reasons, whatever. But we are going to take a look at that old InVasion storyline. We're going to go all the way up until the InVasion pay-per-view. We're going to stop right there. So, how did the InVasion begin? Well, at the end of the Monday Night Wars, the WWF and the WCW were, competing for television ratings, and WCW was shutting down, right? Now, we know the story of the Monday Night War. WCW had mismanagement and money issues, yada, 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 right? WWE bought them for such a cheap price. So on the final night of the Monday Night War, Raw, March 26th, Raw is focused on their main storylines heading into WrestleMania 17. WCW is airing Nitro, their final episode with a Night of Champions special. Vince McMahon was in the ring, and he opened up Nitro, right? And announced a simulcast later that night to address the future of WCW. Throughout Raw's War, he had publicly named several WCW wrestlers who would not be retained. Though this was storyline purpose, he did legitimately fire Jeff Jarrett on television due to animosity between the two. So that's another person not there. Jeff Jarrett had blackmailed Vince McMahon for payment. So after Sting had defeated Ric Flair in WCW's final match, the simulcast began. Vince talked about the buyout of WCW and toyed with the idea of making, WCW a big, huge media conglomeration, much like the WWF. Now, side note, I would have kept the WCW open. I would have not folded them. I would have kept the TV deals. I would have fixed everything, and I would have WWF. I would have WCW. Now, obviously, I would have moved Nitro to a different day, but whatever. That's beside the point. He asked the crowd who he should keep under his belt, mentioning some WCW wrestlers. He asked about Lex Luger and Hulk Hogan, who got negative reactions, but he also asked about Buff Bagwell, Booker T, Sting, Goldberg, who got great positive reactions. So he then just fired them all, much to Raw, right? And Nitro crowd weren't happy. He then announced that he would sign the contract and make the purchase official at WrestleMania on the condition that Ted Turner bring the contract to Vince. However, Shane McMahon appeared on Nitro, and he announced that he signed the contract from Ted Turner and had purchased WCW from under his father's nose. This, ladies and gentlemen, was the start. Now, the InVasion did not begin immediately, right? WWF was preparing for WrestleMania, so we had to wait till after WrestleMania. So with the purchase of WCW, the roster doubled in size, and there wasn't enough screen time for everybody. So there was plans to add a time slot on TNN to continue running WCW as a separate entity, which they really should have done. And WWE had SmackDown, WCW, it was a whole thing. Plans fell through because no network would touch WCW because of its reputation for losing money. But WCW was losing money, the WWF wasn't. So on May 28th, an episode of Raw is War, Lance Storm became the first WCW wrestler to appear on WWF programming, right? He performed a run-in during a match. Then Hugh Morris showed up on a June 4th episode of Raw, attacking Edge. At King of the Ring, WCW champion Booker T interfered during the Triple Threat main event and almost cost Stone Cold the title. Stone Cold also got injured here. from Massage Lemia took from Booker T. Then the next night on Raw, WWF was holding Raw from Madison Square Garden, right? And a conversation happened between Vince and Shane. Vince was in the ring. Booker T showed up, gave Vince a scissor kick. The roster ran out, but Booker and Shane bolted. This marked the start of the invasion. Jim Ross had announced that the Battle Lines had been drawn. WCW Tag Team Champions Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Haire made their debuts by invading SmackDown, attacking the Hardys and attacking the Dudleys. So we've got the main roster getting involved. Now we got the Tag Team division getting involved. As they were exiting the arena, they got attacked by Harker, Holly, and APA, and things were really, really kicking off, right? So in July, ladies and gentlemen, WWF tested the idea of the brand extension, with WWF having one brand, WCW having their brand, right? So during the final 20 minutes of July 2nd on Raw, it was called WCW. Scott Hudson and Arn Anderson were the announcers in place of Jim Ross and Paul Heyman, and during a match between Buff Bagwell and Booker T for the WCW Championship, Kurt Angle and WWF champion Stone Cold interfered, beating up Booker T. Bagwell joined Angle and Austin attacking Booker T. This was very, very poorly received by the fans in the attendance. As reported by sports journalist Michael Landsberg, many called the bout the worst match ever. So, up until this point, right, the WCW contingent were being depicted as malcontent faces rising up against Vince McMahon. Right, we were portioning Vince McMahon as the good guy, WCW as the bad guy, and Shane was trying to usurp power. He already took WCW, now he's trying to take the WWF. There was a horrible gimmick going on that DDP, one of the bigger stars in WCW, who was a part of the invasion, was stalking the Undertaker's wife. This was stupid. So you're asking yourself, well, when does the Alliance come through? The Alliance was the name of the group of WCW and ECW wrestlers. So on a July 9th episode of Raw's War, Kane was supposed to face Mike Awesome and Lance Storm in a handicap match. Jericho came out, offered to be Kane's partner, thus turned into a tag match. Near the end of the match, Jericho applied the Walls of Jericho on Storm. As the move was being applied, RVD and Tommy Dreamer ran through the audience and beat up Kane and Jericho. In response to this, the Dudleys, Taz, Just Incredible, Rhino, and Raven all ran to the ring. Pay attention to those names, right? After a brief standoff, the WWF Cavalry came out and, attacked, these guys. They attacked Kane and Jericho. This prompted Paul Heyman to leave the announce desk and get in the ring. And after he high-fived the wrestlers, he had announced that ECW was joining the invasion. And Paul Heyman being Paul Heyman, talking about how tired he was sitting beside Jim Ross and discussing WCW and WWF, stating that he felt everyone had forgotten about ECW and that the invasion just got taken to the extreme. So this is great, right? And me as a young kid, I am loving this, right? And especially as a young kid from Philadelphia, where ECW was born. I'm like, yes, 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 yes. So the Alliance is formed because later during that night, Shane and Vince bumped into each other, and Shane told his father that ECW needed to be taken care of because, listen, we can go to war, but, they're a problem. So at the end of the night, WCW wrestlers came out accompanied by Shane. The WWF wrestlers came out for one night only. They were going to team up. And before ECW entered the ring, the WCW and WWF wrestlers started to fight. And more WCW wrestlers came to the ring. and got the upper hand and high-fived the ECW man. And Vince was stunned. And Shane was like, yeah, I did this. And he announced that ECW and WCW merged to form the Alliance because ECW's newest owner was Stephanie McMahon. Now, boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Listen, like a lot of people, shocked. Ladies and gentlemen, shocked. But this was just, it was great. It was great. But wait, there's more. Stone Cold had turned heel at WrestleMania 17 and officially came back. And he joined up with the WWF. But also, he was a person who had been in WCW. He created the Stone Cold gimmick in ECW. So there were a lot of guys already on that WWF roster who had been in WCW, who had been in ECW, who had made their bones there, with Stone Cold being one of them. And this ultimately helped turn the tide. You know what I mean? And why did it turn the tide? Well, Vince had told Stone Cold, his mortal enemy, that he had changed since WrestleMania. And when WWF goes up against the Alliance, they don't need him. They don't need it. Hold on. He needed the old Stone Cold. He needed the beer swilling, foul mouth SOB, the old Stone Cold that don't take shit from anyone. He asked Austin to knock him down, even yelling to the crowd, if you want Stone Cold to beat the living hell out of Vince McMahon, give me a hell yeah, to which the crowd responded, hell yeah, you know what I mean? Austin, however, shook his head and proceeded to leave the ring, turning his back on Vince. Later that night, DDP and Shane McMahon went up against Taker and Kurt, with many of the members of the Alliance interfered. Kane and Jericho came out to help the team, but the Alliance numbers were just too great, and without Austin to back them up, the WWF was overwhelmed. That's how much we built up Stone Cold Steve Austin, ladies and gentlemen. And then we get closer and closer and closer to the Alliance pay-per-view. The Invasion pay-per-view. So on July 16th episode of Monday Night Raw, Austin was shown drinking. He was playing pool. He was downtown. And Vince was backstage meeting with Taker, meeting with the APA, trying to give a motivational speech. They should not tolerate the Alliance any longer. After they finished, Brooklyn Brawler wheeled Freddie Blassie into the room so he could dress the wrestlers and pump them up. The wrestlers united. Austin could be seen watching the events on TV. He proceeded to slam his cue stick down on the pool table and left. Later that night, DDP and Rhino took on the Brothers of Destruction, Kane and The Undertaker. During that match, there was interference from the Alliance. In response, the Hardys showed up, the APA showed up, Jericho showed up, Kurt Angle showed up, came out to help their allies. But more Alliance members came in. They overwhelmed the wrestlers. Backstage, people were fighting. And then a truck, I will never forget this. The truck shows up. And out comes Austin with this cue stick, and he proceeds to whoop everybody's ass. Oh my God. He came to the ring, beat down the Alliance, gave stunners to everyone, and the WWF looked good. Cleaned house, standing tall. So that leads us into the Invasion pay-per-view. So the Invasion pay-per-view was taking place on July 22nd, 2001, and the V was highlighted because it was replacing the Vengeance pay-per-view for that year. Right? As Vengeance was a WWE pay-per-view that went on for a long time, and of course it came back to NXT. So let's look at the results. So we had a match on Sunday Night Heat. Remember, this was WWF. This was the WWF versus the Alliance. So first we had Chavo Guerrero defeat Sky Duhati. This match took place on Heat. The main card had 10 matches. All right. So the opening contest was Edge and Christian defeating Lance Storm and Mike Awesome. Okay. The second match was the random referee match with Earl Hebner, representing WWF, defeating Nick Patrick. Mick Foley was the special guest referee for this match. Then we had the APA beat Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Hare. So at the current moment, including the pre-show, WWF is up 3-1. Billy Kidman went on to defeat X-Pac. It's 3-2. Raven went on to go defeat William Regal. It is now 3-3. Chris Kanyon, Hugh Morris, and Sean Stasiak defeated Albert, Big Show, and Billy Gunn. It's now 4-3 in favor of the Alliance. Tajiri defeated Taz 4-4. This match was for the Hardcore Championship. RVD defeated Jeff Hardy for the Hardcore Championship. So it's now 5-4 in favor of the Alliance. Trish and Lita defeated Tori Wilson and Stacy Keibler in a brawl and panties match. Mick Foley was the guest referee there, so it's 5-5. It's coming down to the final match. It is a 10-man tag team match. Representing Team WWF were Chris Jericho, Kane, Kurt Angle, Stone Cold, and The Undertaker. They were accompanied by Vince. The Alliance had Booker T, the Dudley Boys, DDP, and Rhino. They had Shane, Stephanie, and Paul Heyman with them. Now, on paper, this was a no DQ tag match at that. On paper, the Alliance should have lost. Just because when you consider the star power that's on Team WWF, the Alliance should have. And that's not to say the Alliance didn't have star power. You have Booker T. The Dudleys, one of the greatest tag teams of all time. DDP, a former WCW champion, and Rhino, a former ECW champion. He's a one-time ECW champion, and he was the final ECW champion. So they had their respective main eventers. So the match is going on, and they're fighting. There's just a brawl going on, and WWF is just dominating until Booker T helps turn the tide. And now you know how these matches go. Wrestlington is back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So Booker T performed a flat jack and everybody's down, right? Vince gets the championship and attempts to throw into the ring to Angle. Shane takes it and hits Vince. Shane failed to hit Kurt, right? Then Angle threw both Shane and Bubba Ray Dudley out of the ring. Angle performs an angle slam on Booker T and applies the ankle lock, and we are cooking. The WWF is going to win. After sending the ref back into the ring, Austin turns on the WWF, hits a stunner on Kurt, and Booker T pins him, and the Alliance wins. Stone Cold celebrates with Shane, Stephanie, and Paul. And here's the thing that was shocking, and as a kid, it is very, very, very shocking. But as an adult today, it actually makes sense. Not him teaming with WCW, but him teaming with ECW, because Paul Heyman was the man that afforded Stone Cold that freedom to find himself, right? And why would he help Vince McMahon? They have been mortal enemies. So he aligns himself with the alliance, and we'll end it there, right? So now as we look forward to the NXT/TNA showdown, if you even look at the poster, the W is highlighted. We can go check out the Let's Talk About video. Where do we stand? TNA has been playing little brother to NXT for a long time, and now we have this showdown. We have 4 matches scheduled. We have Ethan Page versus Ali for the North American Championship. We got the Hardys versus Dark State title for title tag team championships. And then we have 2 traditional Survivor Series tag team matches. It's 4-on-4, not 5-on-5. For the women, representing NXT is JC Jane, Jada Parker, Soda Ruka, and Lola Vice. And on the TNA side of things, it's Kelani Jordan, Jessie the Inspiration, and Mara Sade. Now, here's the thing about that. Team TNA is one NXT wrestler and Kelani Jordan, right? She's the current TNA Knockout champion, but she's an NXT wrestler. Mara Sade, who was Jakara Jackson in NXT, but it seems like she's definitely down for TNA. And then you have the Inspiration, who used to be the Iconics in NXT. So here we are, like, yo. The women's team is a little shaky, and then on the men's side of things, we got Ricky Saints, Trick Williams, Javon Evans, and Miles Bourne representing NXT. And on TNA, we've got Santana, Kaz, Moose, and Leon Slater. Now, in my opinion, TNA men should win that match. They should win that match. But what's missing are 2 very specific wrestlers, and that would be none other than Joe Hendry and Jordan Grace. Where are they? This is a little concerning because Jordan Grace is now part of the NXT roster, but at the heart of the matter, she is still a TNA wrestler. Joe Hendry is literally contracted under TNA, but we know he's going to the WWE at some point. So how are we doing this? This is going to be an interesting show. It's also going up against AEW's Title Tuesday. So this is going to be very, very, very tough to really see how things are going to work out. It's going to be a fun night of wrestling. The InVasion could have been so much more because we're going to end on that high note of the InVasion pay-per-view, but not the pay-per-view itself, the aftermath of the pay-per-view, because it was a lot. But I have fun talking about this. I hope you did too. Go back and watch some of the videos, especially watch the there's a SmackDown where like the ending is crazy. Every top star in those companies, their respective companies, comes out and hits their finishers on everybody. Check it out. But that is our show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Look on the screen what we got coming up. October is going to be a fun month. You know, you can check out the socials, Charismatic Creations on Facebook and YouTube, Charismatic_Creations52 on Instagram, and of course the 215 on Twitter. And as always, Anna J, Chris Statlander, Willow Nightingale, Priscilla Kelly, Dawn and Bailey. Holla at your boy. Peace.